It was a Tuesday, barely past 7 in the morning, and the shipping yard office smelled like diesel and burnt coffee, same as it had for the past 18 years. I was hunched over the customs manifests, double-checking a flagged import from Veracruz when I heard him behind me. Jonah, hey Paula, you ever think about streamlining this stuff? I didn't even bother lifting my head. Just kept my eyes moving line by line across the manifest, pen tapping twice against the margin the way it always did when something felt off. Jonah moved like he owned the place, shoes clicking too loud on the concrete, all confidence and cologne. Fresh haircut, polished boots, sleeves rolled just enough to signal ambition. He held a laminated process map like a prop, glossy and stiff, probably printed 10 minutes ago after some consultant webinar. He flipped it toward the room like a magician revealing a trick. See, here's the bottleneck, he said, tapping my initials on a clearance step I'd written back in 2009. Old school redundancies, necessary once, sure, but now. It's just friction. I caught the smirk even without looking directly at him. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't curious. It was that tight, satisfied curl people get when they think the outcome is already decided. No offense, Paula, he added, like that somehow softened it. You've kept things moving, but we're transitioning into phase-based logic and lean velocity. These risk holds, honestly, what are they even doing? Feels like overkill. The efficiency team stood behind him nodding in unison, heads bobbing like dashboard toys. I took a slow sip of my vending machine coffee, the same burnt, hollow sludge I'd been drinking since 2006, and let him keep talking. He had no idea what those holds had stopped. No clue that one of them caught a shipment of counterfeit medication hidden under a medical glove label. No idea I'd slept in my car during Hurricane Harvey, rain hammering the windshield, just to keep the floodgate controls from going offline. Jonah called my work antiquated, said we were drowning in checks and balances. Sure, checks that kept us compliant, balances that kept the company out of federal court. He was fresh out of a logistics certificate program, still smelling like student loans and case studies. Someone upstairs slapped Director of Freight Optimization on his badge and thought that made them visionary. Jonah wasn't there to build anything. He was there to erase it. The VP of Ops straightened the second Jonah entered the room. Not because Jonah understood the yard, but because he spoke fluent buzzword. I felt it settle in my gut. This wasn't efficiency. This was a soft kill, slow and quiet, and I was the target. By Thursday, pieces started disappearing. Subtle at first. A single line removed from a workflow diagram. A checklist that stopped populating without explanation. Jonah hovered over the ops dashboard like he was defusing a bomb, except he didn't know what any of the wires actually powered. He called a meeting, announced he was reducing drag. First casualty was the red tag protocol. Gone. We don't need to flag low-risk shipments anymore, he said, smiling like he was doing us a favor. It's a volume game now, throughput over friction. I raised my hand. You remember why the red tag list exists, right? Built after the twin-axle hazmat stall in 15. Those holds stopped. He cut me off mid-sentence. Paula, I know you're attached to your archives, but this is a new era. Then he deleted the container scan logs, wiped them clean, said they were redundant. That one hurt. Those logs were my paper trail, my proof. But the real damage came when he killed the vendor lockout list. I built that after a smuggling attempt in 2017, lithium batteries hidden in crates labeled baby formula. Almost burned half the dock. Legal and compliance helped me put that list together, every vendor flagged with documented violations. Jonah erased it with one Slack message. Legacy flags removed, starting fresh. I asked him straight out if he wanted to review the historical violations first. He laughed, actually laughed. It's called modernizing, Paula. Try to keep up. I didn't argue. I went back to my desk, opened a blank document, and started logging. Every change, timestamps, names, systems touched, functions removed. I labeled them Risk Memo 1, Risk Memo 2, and kept going. No CCs. No announcements. Just breadcrumbs, quietly dropped. Then he deleted the overlay system I built after the 2018 dock breach, the one that cross-checked shipping IDs against ports of origin. It caught 2 high-level discrepancies in 6 months, one tied to a stolen cargo ring. Now it was gone. I asked Jonah for 15 minutes. He nodded without looking up. Never followed through. Tried again the next day, same silence. Then the message came, one sentence. Just cut the dead weight, we're going lean. That's when it finally clicked. This wasn't process improvement, it was personal. Every system I built, every safeguard with my fingerprints on it, he was stripping away. I wasn't being sidelined. I was being erased. The next morning, I logged in like normal. Coffee in hand, hair still damp, half a banana on my desk. Calendar pinged with a last-minute all-staff Zoom from the VP. No agenda, 80 attendees. I knew. The second I joined, Jonah was there, front and center, sitting tall like a golden retriever proud of the stick it fetched. The VP came on next, posture rigid. Analysts trickled in. Someone was chewing a Pop-Tart. Before we begin, the VP said, we need to address behaviors creating friction against forward momentum. He talked about resistance, obstruction, fear-based culture. Then he said my name. Paula, we expect collaboration, not sabotage. If you have something to say, now is the time to apologize. No one spoke. I unmuted and said, okay, nothing else. I stayed logged in through the rest of it, face blank, hands still. That okay wasn't surrender. It was preparation. That night, I pulled the old file box from my hall closet, the one from before the merger swallowed everything. Dust filled the air. Inside was my original consulting contract from 2004, amended in 2019. I flipped pages fast, steady. Clause 19b. If the contractor is removed without cause, all derivative systems remain property of the contractor. They didn't fire me clean. They fired me sloppy. And everything Jonah destroyed, it was mine. By morning, I was back in my old freight grid console, buried behind a forgotten subdomain they never secured. I didn't shut anything down yet. I let 3 API keys expire quietly. Dashboards loaded, but the data was gone. No alerts, no warnings, just silence. I opened a draft email, voluntary resignation, effective TBD. Then I opened my private catalog. Every system, every protocol, every license still under my LLC. Active, untouched. Jonah's new dashboards were pulling from my tools. He didn't know it. I made a few quiet edits. Nothing loud, changed a field call. Adjusted a function tag. One script would now hit a delay loop at exactly 2:03 a.m. on Friday. I knew because I said it. Friday came. At 2003, Jonah's shiny new data-driven insight panel stalled out. Not a full crash, just a slow fade. Graphs stopped refreshing. Shipment statuses hung in limbo. Warehouse arrivals showed 0 updates. Nobody noticed. That was the beauty of it. They were too busy handing out pastries and clapping each other on the back for a seamless digital transition. I watched it all from my desk. No one asked me anything. No questions, no Slack pings. I was already invisible to them, exactly how I wanted it. The dominoes weren't tipping yet, but the base was cracking. I made a list on paper, not a spreadsheet. Paper, something they couldn't trace. I wrote out every dependent system. Port ID validator, shipment parser, customs pre-clearance bot, vendor history filter, all mine. Still powered by Freight Grid, still under contract language that hadn't been overwritten in any legal doc. They thought they absorbed me. All they did was lease the wiring. I opened a secure shell into a backup server no one had logged into since 2016. It ran a mirror of the original Freight Grid framework. From there, I could watch everything. Not touch. Not yet, just watch. I was almost ready. Monday hit slow and cold. I got to the yard before sunrise like always, but this time I didn't go inside. Just sat in my car with the engine off, watching from across the lot. My badge was still active, but the resignation email was timed to send. At 8:01 a.m., I left my desk empty. No coffee cup, no clipboard, no label printer, just a clean surface and one white box in the chair. Sealed and taped. At 8:06, Jonah rolled in like a man walking into his own movie. Aviators swinging from his neck, smoothie in one hand, Bluetooth earpiece blinking like it did something important. He didn't even glance at the parking lot, just strolled through the doors like it was another day to be the hero. I watched him pause at my desk, saw him tilt his head like something didn't compute. No signs of life, no note, just silence. He pulled out his phone, tapped into the dashboard app. I already knew what he'd see. Blank graphs, red loading errors, 3 systems offline, 2 in timeout loops, 1 stuck at fetching results. He stared at the screen a few seconds longer than he probably meant to, then turned and walked toward his office with that stiff, clipped pace people use when they're pretending not to panic. Inside, it was waking up. By 9:20, the first help desk ticket dropped. Freight grid vendor license conflict. Port ID mismatch. 10 minutes later, another system check. Primary key failure on inventory flow tracker. Then came legal. They didn't notice me missing. They noticed Freight Grid Solutions popping up as the registered vendor on two critical systems, both of which had been marked internal builds by Jonah's reports. One junior associate flagged the clause buried in the 2019 contract appendix. Derivative system rights retained by original builder. A senior analyst pulled the contracts again. Freight Grid never dissolved. It was still active, still listed as a private vendor. Then one of the lawyers, no idea who, probably someone who actually reads, connected the last dot. All those legacy systems Jonah bragged about replacing, they weren't replaced. They were repackaged, skinned, and renamed. But the engine underneath still mine, still Freight Grid, and now the bones were cracking. The compliance bots failed next. They couldn't validate inbound shipment tags because the core database wasn't responding. That database tied to a Freight Grid license set to autolock if accessed without an active agreement. It tried to patch it. License key bounced. By 10:30, legal was in full scramble. I knew because I got 3 hits on my old server IPS, all from devices tagged to legal.associates. In internal. They were trying to backtrace. Too late. Every dependency they ignored was surfacing all at once. I didn't gloat, didn't laugh. I just sat in my car, sipping the same weak coffee from my chip travel mug, watching the building eat itself from the inside. They thought I'd been purged. What they didn't realize was I was the damn foundation, and they just tore out their own spine. At 9:30, the real cracks opened. 4 clients, big ones, requested access to their shipment tracking dashboards for quarter-end audits. Same time, same request. Every screen returned the same thing. No data available. Contact administrator. By 9:35, finance was sweating. Jonah told them, "It's just a hiccup, probably a temporary sync issue. We're rolling out updates, remember?" Except legal already knew that was a lie. They weren't chasing a bug. They were scrambling to cover a legal disaster. I could picture it. Half the legal team packed into their glass fishbowl of a conference room. Paralegals tearing through contracts, while directors tried to figure out when exactly they lost control. At 9:42, someone finally found it. A paralegal named Jessica. We'd crossed paths once in 19. Dug up the Freight Grid vendor agreement from 2004. Still active, still legally binding. It had been renewed in 2019 when the system upgrades launched. Right before the merger, no override, no amendments, just a clean defaulted clause. Derivative systems remained property of the vendor unless explicitly transferred. And guess who never filed a transfer? Jonah, because he didn't know the systems weren't internal. He never asked, never read, never built a damn thing, just slapped on new dashboards and called it innovation. At 10:06, I got the email, not from Jonah, not from legal, from the CEO's assistant. Subject line, touching base, just one sentence in the body. "Hope you're well. Would you be open to talking?" That told me everything I needed. The CEO didn't want a war. He wanted to negotiate because legal had finally laid it out for him. They'd fired me without process. No performance review, no paper trail, no clause-triggered exit, and I owned every system currently on fire. I bet the CFO was the one who figured out how deep it went. By 10:15, finance had flagged 3 unrovable audit gaps, all tied to missing data from Freight Grid-connected systems. I heard through an old warehouse buddy that the CFO looked like he'd seen a ghost, just pale and quiet, blinking into his laptop like it had betrayed him. Meanwhile, Jonah gone, not physically. He was still in the building, but not answering. He ducked into one of the small soundproof call rooms on the 2nd floor. No window, no noise, just the flicker of fluorescent light, and whatever regret feels like when it's finally setting in. HR didn't know where he was. Legal didn't care. The building was burning, and their golden boy had vanished like a freshman who pulled the fire alarm and ran. My systems, those legacy bloat tools he'd mocked, were now mission-critical and completely offline. No access, no backups. They'd burned the bridge before checking if they could swim. And I was still dry, still watching, still holding the keys. At exactly 10:30, they started the emergency board meeting. No agenda, no slides, no pleasantries, just panic. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't have to be. I had 3 different people send me screenshots by 10:32. Top of the projector screen, manifest audit file not found. That was the file Jonah deleted 2 weeks ago. The compliance master, I told him not to touch. It was the only full archive of shipment manifests from the last 5 years. Built to meet international audit standards, encrypted and version locked. I warned him in writing twice. He wiped it anyway. Thought the new system didn't need bloated legacy formats. Turns out there were no backups, no logs, just a flashy wrapper built on top of empty calls and shallow templates. The board didn't even pretend to stay calm. One of the external directors asked if it was a hack. Another said something about ransomware, then legal dropped the bomb. The systems weren't hacked. They're inaccessible because we no longer hold valid rights to them, one of the firm's lawyers said. Silence. Another board member leaned forward. What do you mean we don't hold rights? Legal flipped through a binder. They were built and maintained under Freight Grid Solutions, LLC, a private vendor. Active agreement last renewed in 2019. Ownership wasn't transferred. Who's Freight Grid? The answer came with the kind of weight that makes people shift in their chairs. Paula, the name landed like a stone. Then came the follow-up. So who has the encrypted backups? Legal didn't blink. Only one person. Every head turned. And just like that, they got it. I wasn't the system manager. I was the system. Every data flow, every cross-check, every port tag, compliance script, and security layer written by me, approved by me, run under my name. Jonah hadn't replaced me. He just skinned the exterior and hoped no one would notice the guts underneath were mine. Now the guts were gone, and they were bleeding out. The VP of Ops, who'd backed Jonah from day one, sat with his mouth open, blinking like maybe if he blinked enough, the problem would fix itself. The CFO whispered something to the chairman. I don't know what, but the chairman slammed his palm down a second later. How far does this go? Legal was ready. Every audit file, every freight validator, every real-time tracking tool, they're all built on Freight Grid code. Without a license, we're in breach. Another pause. Then the chairman leaned in. No expression, just cold math. What are our options? Legal didn't sugarcoat it. Negotiate carefully. That word hung there. Carefully, like it was the only thing holding them back from full collapse. I got another message at 10:51. This one from the internal IT lead. Hey Paula, you available for a quick call? No pressure, just want to ask a few questions. Translation, the fire's out of control. And they finally realized who had the hose. I didn't reply, not yet. I just sat in my kitchen watching the clock tick past 11, letting the silence build. They hadn't just fired me. They erased the only person who knew how the machine ran. And now they were stuck staring at the wreckage, trying to figure out how to reboot a system that no longer belonged to them. I never responded to the CEO assistant email. Let it sit unread for 2 more days. Let them stew in it. By Wednesday, Jonah was nowhere to be found on the daily call sheet. His name got pulled from the leadership Slack. Someone told me quietly that he'd been reassigned to special projects. No access, no meetings, no reports, just vanished behind some made-up title that sounded important but meant exile. The same guy who called my protocols dead weight was now locked out of the systems he couldn't even explain. Meanwhile, procurement flipped the switch. No announcement, no email, no welcome back, just a silent update in the vendor portal. Freight Grid Solutions active vendor. That was all I needed to see. A tiny checkbox rechecked. Behind the scenes, they were scrambling. HR pushed out a vague company-wide memo about legacy infrastructure stabilization and cross-functional system review. Not a word about me. Not a word about the fire they started. They were trying to make it look controlled, like this was part of some big picture audit. But I saw the truth between the lines. They weren't stabilizing anything. They were trying to stop the bleeding. Legal had probably torn through every contract by now, and rumor was I wasn't the only one with teeth in a clause. Old developers, a former project lead, even a temp from 17 who coded a security patch that never got reassigned. People they discarded without reading the fine print. That's the problem when leadership runs on buzzwords and bravado. They stop reading the footnotes. And people like me, we are the footnotes. We're the part they skip until the walls cave in. By Friday, they'd quietly restored 5 freight grid-linked systems. No PR, no press, just flipped them back online and acted like they'd never touched a thing. I didn't take their money. Not yet. They didn't deserve resolution, wrapped in a clean invoice. I let the window stay open just wide enough. Watched their mouse cursor hover over the request support button in the vendor portal for almost an hour. They didn't click. Not yet. They were scared. Scared of how much I knew. Scared of how little they could do without me. And honestly, they should have been. A week later, the call came through. Unlisted number, no caller ID. I let it ring twice, then picked up without a word. A woman's voice, steady, practiced, not salesy, not rushed. "We represent a shipping consortium," she said. "We saw your system. We're interested." She didn't say who she was with. Didn't have to. Calls like that don't come from the bottom. That was someone with a view from the top floor. Someone who had seen the crash, traced the wreckage, and followed the data straight back to me. I didn't speak. She didn't feel the silence. She just waited, confident. They always are when they know what they want. "You built Freight Grid from the ground up," she said finally. "Your structure caught our attention." She used the word structure, not software, not tools. That meant they'd looked closely, seen what held everything together, not the dashboards, the backbone. I still didn't say anything. She continued like she was reading from a folder. "We're considering transitioning our inland logistics platforms. We need something stable, something tested, quietly effective." That last part almost made me smile. Quietly effective. The exact thing they tried to erase me for. "We'd be open to a conversation if you're willing," she added. No pressure, no tone, just the offer left on the table like a clean knife. I let her words hang in the air. Didn't accept, didn't decline, just let it hang. Because here's the thing, what they called old wasn't outdated. It was foresight. What they dismissed as overkill, that was what kept their freight moving when everything else failed. They didn't drown because they were smart. They stayed afloat because I built the damn life raft before the storm hit. I didn't need to torch anything. I didn't take down systems. Didn't post a long goodbye or slam the door. I just reclaimed what was mine. Unplugged my end and let the rest slide quietly into the river. While they scrambled for life jackets, I stood on the bank, dry, ready, and now other ships were circling. I sat at my kitchen table, same spot I'd had since the freight grid days. The coffee was lukewarm. Mug was chipped near the handle, same one I used to bring to the yard every morning. Laptop was shut, folders gone, the access keys, backups, and credentials I'd carried for nearly 2 decades. I fed them into the wood stove one by one. Watched them curl, blacken, and vanish like old receipts. No dramatics, no big final move, just a soft end, a full stop. Let someone else hold the clipboard now. They didn't want me back because they respected the work. They wanted me back because I was the only one who remembered how everything worked. And that's the part that stuck with me the most. Not the firing, not the gutless Zoom, not even Jonah hiding like a kid who broke the copier. It was that they didn't care until they needed me. And now that the panic settled, now that things were running again under the Freight Grid name, they thought maybe I'd just slide back in. Quiet, cooperative, they still didn't get it. I didn't want the corner office. I didn't need the handshake or the title. I wanted peace. No more urgent pings at 11:42 p.m. No more meetings where some guy with a marketing degree translates my systems back to me in front of a whiteboard. No more flowcharts drawn by people who never touched a port scanner. Just peace. And that's what I had now. The woman from the consortium. Her voice still played in my head sometimes. Calm, interested, no ego. I hadn't called her back yet. Might not. The thing is I could. That option was mine now. And that more than anything is what mattered. Some exits aren't for applause. They're for silence. For space, for air that doesn't hum with tension. They're for peace of mind. And I finally got mine.